So, welcome everybody. We are live with the fourth session of today of Tales in Dialogue. This session is going to be facilitated by Lara, and it has the title of Climate Governance. We have participants from different corners in the world here: Shayla in the US, Ifatu in Austria, Eva in Portugal, Willa in Amsterdam, and Rob in Brazil. And I will pass on the word to you, Lara, for you to kickstart this. I see you guys in about an hour again.
Thank you, Breno. Thank you, Tales in Dialogue, for this invitation and for this opportunity to be here, knowing new people and talk about this important thing for me and for the world. I hope we enjoy our time together. And I will introduce myself a little bit as Breno introduced to us. So my name is Lara Martins. I'm talking from Barcelona, Spain, but I am from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It's a pleasure to have all of you here to talk about this important theme. I am Lara Martins, a Brazilian Black woman activist for an inclusive, fair, and sustainable future for all. And for this reason, I work in a global movement that certifies business. I am one of the Brazilian delegates for the G20 Youth Engagement Group, and I am also one of the Brazilian citizens who participated of the COP26 this year, the UN Climate Change Conference. So, to start and to know better people that are here and you too that are listening to us in YouTube, I would like to propose a check-in, a start moment to know and to feel the energy and how this scene is important for everyone. I will share my screen for meme we do in Brazil, and I would like to introduce you in this. And I'm sharing my screen. Please, can you confirm that are you seeing my screen? With a song.
Yes.
Yes, so this is Vanessa Nakati, an Uganda activist. And sometime the media took off Vanessa Nakati from the photos of climate activists. And I want to bring her for the center of this dialogue to highlight the importance of her work. And I would like to ask you today, we are talking about climate governance, and I'd like to know how is your mood when the subject is climate change, climate crisis, from 1 to 9. So you can pick a photo that it's aligned with your humor, with your mood today, and please repeat your name. Where are you from? What do you do, and why you choose this photo and number? Please, the floor is with the first one. Anyone would like to begin?
I can
Okay.
start. Willa from Amsterdam. I think my mood is maybe 6.
Okay. And what do you do, Willa?
So I started an agency 11 years ago called W Green, and we try to. I used to work in fashion for 10 years in regular fashion, and I decided I no longer wanted to be part of that system. So I decided to actually start an agency that can help brands become more sustainable, take climate action, but also to inspire the market and consumers and the press by showing them examples of how companies can actually be part of the change. And next to that, I do a lot of speaking, like public speaking, a lot of workshops, classes, part of like a fashion school in the Netherlands, where I also try to bring this topic top of mind, and all kinds of other things. But these are the main things I'm working on currently.
Great, thank you. The
And
next
I lived
one.
in Brazil. I lived in Brazil for a year.
That's nice. Thank you. Who's the next?
I can go on. So my mood, or the picture that speaks to me most today, is number 8, Climate Can't Wait. I'm Eva from Berlin and living in Portugal since a bit more than a year, and in a region that's absolutely gorgeous, but also quite endangered in terms of how the resources are treated. I'm a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker. I did for many years socially engaged films, and I am a little bit clueless how I should focus my activist soul here, and how I can work on that topic that's so important to me, via film or via holding banners. That's me.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ifatu. I come from Nigeria. I'm in Vienna at the moment. I also live in Berlin. My mood is number 2. I work as an artist, mostly with film and photography. And I picked number 2 because it's really, especially coming from Nigeria, it's kind of like the climate is not really a big discussion. Those of us who, but everyone feels the impact, but we just kind of like looking, and it's hard to know where to start doing stuff from.
Thank you. The next one.
Hello, everybody. I'm currently in Bahia in Brazil, but I'm actually from Amsterdam, Holland. I choose number 8 because the climate can't wait. The UN Secretary General has given a code red, and rightfully so. And it is my profound understanding that we need to do this decade enough to turn things around, or we will be too late to avoid a runaway climate catastrophe. That sounds very dangerous, and it is. At the same time, I also think that we actually have the tools. We are discovering the tools to do that regeneration of the planet right now. I'm part of several organizations, including Climate Change and Consciousness, and the World Climate School, and I run my own Facebook group on which is called Metamorphosis, which is the metamorphosis of our species and of our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. We are missing someone.
Hi. Thanks for holding the space, Lara. I think I identify today with number 3 because it's like she's hiding behind the most obvious statement, and she's saying, just look at this while I look at you. Kind of like, we know what to do. Now we need to just do, right? So a little bit about me. I live in the den in the capital of the United States, in Washington, D.C. I work on climate change policy for the federal government. I don't actually work for the federal government. I work for a non-governmental organization, but we design policy that we hope we would ultimately be adopted by the federal government, particularly around pricing greenhouse gas emissions. I work really technically in the weeds of how to administer certain policies, so very deep into kind of the wonky details of how, and then more broadly, we try and just get our Congress to act on climate change, because unlike the EU, for example, we don't have a nationwide policy to address climate change as a whole. We're very much struggling with that. We came with a lot of enthusiasm to COP26, but very little backing for actually how we're going to implement that enthusiasm. Pricing carbon, pricing greenhouse gases is one way to do it. There's many other ways to do it. And then on a more personal note, I'm really fond of trying to understand how to be a steward of the environment, how to live my life with a moral compass that's not necessarily supported by today's society, and finding a balance of how to be in this world, but also not let it take away from me what I find to be most important, just being kind and being sustainable. So that's a bit about me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will pick the free also because I like the meaning that we are not a tourist in this planet. We are part of them. It's our house and we have to preserve it, take care of it. So be part of the solution. And I love the fact that all of us are global citizens. So that is nice. So now we can start. I will introduce the talking piece ritual from Tales in Dialogue. I have this object with me to bring the light to the dialogue. It's a light, and but I will put in this place my hand, and I can offer the word for you when I put my hands like this, and you can have the word if you grab the word. So it's to us to understand when each one can speak. And I will get the start of our section with a speech and then with a video. So as I said before, I am part of a global movement of business, the B movement, and the B Corps, more than 4,100 in the world right now, are a new kind of business that balance purpose and profit. They are legally required to consider the impact of their decision on their workers, customers, suppliers, community, and the environment. Being so innovative and pioneering, how this business could be part of the solution to the biggest social and environmental challenge of our society. In 2019, over 1,600 businesses, including more than 1,000 B Corps, the sustainable business, have made a commitment to become net zero by 2030, a full 20 years ahead of the 2050 target set in the Paris Agreement. We know that meaningful actions and credible commitments towards significant carbon reduction are essential to tackling the climate crisis. And the B Corp community of business leaders and consumers are eager to move the conversation beyond commitments and toward meaningful action. The net zero has 4 steps: pledge, plan, proceed, and publish. But before it, I will play a sound to start our conversation, our dialogue. So, to inspire us, I will show you a video.
You okay? You need a minute? Cool. Okay. Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Think of all the other things you could do with that money. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
It's now or never. And it's our big chance. So from this moment, I would like to bring us our seed question. That is, how can business put climate justice at the heart of climate action to guarantee our existence? And some reminders here of our dialogue principle. Remember to be brief and precise. Speak from the heart and listen as you would like to be listened to. The floor is yours.
I'm just gonna start by saying that thank you, Lara, for sharing that video. It was really touching, and for me, it was actually very sad that we had to get a dinosaur to remind us, of what could happen to us. Like I thought it was a great idea, but also just like really ridiculous. Like this is kind of where we are at now. So that made me very sad to watch the video. In terms of the question and kind of also, me just being here as a person who comes from Nigeria and thinking about businesses there and thinking about consumers there. I was just in Nigeria until about a week ago, and there is a lot of pollution, especially like regarding plastics, single-use plastics, and I think that's one of the biggest like waste material that we make. At least this is what I've seen, and one of the biggest things you see in the plastic is like water that was in plastic bags, and it's a business. I remember when it started, I was really young. And this started because you couldn't just get clean tap water to drink. So you would make these little plastic sachets and put water inside, and you could buy it really, really cheaply for like less than the equivalent of like 0.01 cents in euros kind of thing. And they were responding to a need, the businesses are responding to a need that people do need clean drinking water, and they found a really cheap way to do it. But of course, it's at the expense of the environment because we can't recycle these bags. And what happens is that they end up, you see them at the beaches, you see them in the ocean, it goes into the rivers and everything. And, but it's what people need, right? People need water. And whenever I think of questions like this, I'm thinking of, especially in Nigeria, is like, okay, but there is a need. People do need this. If you make it more expensive, say you put it in a glass bottle or a bottle that is recyclable, the people who need the water might not be able to buy it. And I'm always thinking of, people have come up with a solution to help people, but it's at the expense of the environment. And sometimes it seems like there's no way to balance these two needs. Yeah, that's kind of what I have to say. I'm gonna give it back.
Thank you, Ifatu. I'm a businessman myself, and I think the joy of doing business is actually a little bit like the joy of doing sports. It's about the game. And it's also about shining in the game. And right now, businesses are pulled and pushed into a corner that they are actually the villains of the story. Whereas the businesses actually, most that I know, are not just about profit. They are about being the hero of the story, to excel. And at this moment, climate change and the climate catastrophe is by far the most dangerous challenge we have ever met. So becoming part of the solution, becoming a hero of the story, will drive a lot of people in businesses to actually get behind the solutions for climate change, because we do have the solutions. It is more a matter of aligning our minds and our hearts and our hands to actually implement the solutions at the speed and the scale necessary. And at the same time, because also it says here, climate justice, make sure that the people who are actually running the economy, quite often the poor people in the global south, are actually getting rewarded for regenerating our planet in a just and in a sufficient way. And I think it's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think, how can businesses put climate justice at the heart of climate action? I think what is a really big issue is the image of climate change, especially how to do things better. I think the image that it has is that it's expensive and it's exclusive, and that it doesn't include all people in all corners of the world. Especially, I think what bothers me a lot is that the ones who are responsible for the majority of the issues, or actually probably the whole issue, is the global north, of which I'm part of. But then the people who first suffer from it are people from the global south. And there's a lot of course, in the global north, there's a lot of means to have an impact and to change. But a lot of people don't feel like taking the responsibility, and companies are starting to feel, I think, the urge to take the responsibility. But I think there's also been a lot of lobby for try to make people believe that it's in the hands of the people, that people should be the ones who have to change their ways. But if you look, of course, at the real impact, it is made by the industry, by governments and companies. Those are the ones that really have a lot of impact. And of course, consumers, which is a horrible word, or people, they also can have their take part in some ways and forms. But I think the real big impact comes from governments and countries and companies. And I think governments are probably afraid that it's going to be very expensive. They're afraid of maybe high debts, but I mean, it's either extinction or horrible living conditions, or debt. So I think that's something that's a very easy choice in my opinion. And companies, yeah, I think they should invest now, not tomorrow, but really now, because I think the later you invest, also the more expensive it's going to be. And I think if we all join, really from an intrinsic motivation, join, the B Corp movement, or join the movement for a better tomorrow, and not only put financial wins at the top of your business, but also try to see how you can actually leave a better impact. That is what is needed right now. And and I think it will also actually lead to a lot of financial benefits as well. So I think that's how it should be perceived. Unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of people who don't perceive it that way yet.
I also have a candle. It smells very good. So a couple of thoughts. I feel like a lot of good behavior and bad behavior from businesses cascade throughout the rest of the world. And I think the process of changing is not going to be perfect. So Ifatu, when you talk about the plastic problem in Nigeria, maybe right now you don't need a solution, because right now maybe you can't, because you need to be able to afford to transport that water. And I think there's going to be blockages. And I think we should put pressure on every single angle we possibly can put. But ultimately, we're going to see change where change is most likely to happen. And I just really hope that enough of the good behavior, good business practices are going to start cascading and having impacts around the world too. So the solutions will come. And I think it's a huge responsibility of more developed nations to foster that, because we have the privilege and the time and the resources to do that. So there's so much waste. And so that's kind of one thought. But another thought is that, kind of speaking more to Lara's like seed question about how do you address climate with justice at the center? I think that is so radical, but also so appropriate. And I think it's the only way to do this. And I think that, to me personally, climate change is just a microcosm. It's just an example of something much larger. It's not just about climate change, right? It's everything. It's how we're living. It's not right now. Climate change is the most literal, most in-your-face example of how things are going wrong. And it's really nice to get a sense of urgency and to put your hands around something at least and say, we need to change this. But it goes far, far beyond that, and which is why climate justice makes so much sense. This is about justice, really. So just wanted to put those two thoughts out from all your wonderful comments so far.
Yeah, when I add another thing that is related to my home country, which is Germany, where I remember it when I was also very young, where the recycling started, and suddenly all these different colored bins popped up, and you could put plastic and glass and paper, and it was a big thing, and it felt so good for me and for many of the Germans. I mean, it's quite known that the Germans are the recycling nations, to do their little part for saving the planet. And it didn't take too long, but in the last year it got more and more prominent how there is a really ugly business behind, and all these washed plastic things might not end up in the recycling station, but are just burned and it's sold or it's shipped somewhere. So basically, I felt when we talk about businesses and the impact that people have and the need that I strongly felt there that everyone wants to have. One big lack that I feel is the transparency in so many things. And I would love to have that, like when I go shopping, and I would love that all the products have a QR code and I can just track the paths they have taken. And even with when I Google or search somewhere with an address where I could go or someone can go and can have transparency, I feel would be something that could change the core of things, because I think people have a massive power because we do decide with our purse where we shop, where we go, what we buy, and this has a big impact. And I think most of people would love to make a change there. Just it's so complicated right now to follow the path of the products. That's the word.
I love what you just said about the recycling in Germany, Eva. I was learning German last year and the year before, and recycling is literally one of the things you get examined on. You're asked to talk about your recycling experience because there's so many bins, and so so many different places to take different things to. But also speaking on the transparency, I think that is so important because you do your part as a person, and you feel like, okay, I've done the good thing, I bought the right thing, I've recycled in the right way. But there is no way to know where the things are going. Even when I'm just like watching the recycling bin come to take away the stuff, at that point in time, I can see everything that I just spent hours trying to figure out how to separate has been put into one truck. And that's just the start, it's just leaving your apartment. And I've read articles or watched documentaries where, the thing that you supposedly recycled has been found on a beach in Malaysia or something like that, or in a recycling plant there. And but these are the same businesses that are telling you that they've done their part. But as people say, we were to decide that, okay, we don't want to buy from this business because actually they're not doing everything they promised to do. It's kind of like, where are the spaces for us to discuss our alternatives? What are our alternatives really, Bye-bye.
And we just passed for the Black Friday. It's a ritual of our society to buy things we don't need. So, what is our power as citizens, our individual level in this moment, to avoid this pressure, the culture of the consumerism, for example?
Just yesterday, I came across a beautiful initiative, which I think has something to do with Black Friday and maybe with the consumption rush around Christmas. And that's the Buy Nothing movement, which is basically a movement where groups exchange goods that they have too much of and give them to people who need them at that moment. So basically, you make a lot of superfluous stuff in some households useful in others. It's a sort of a very hopeful circularity of local economies without producing and consuming and wasting more. So I thought it was really wonderful, and I hope it will take off worldwide. Thank you.
I just want to quickly add, I'm part of a Buy Nothing Facebook group, particularly for my neighborhood that spans like 6 blocks. So it's spreading the movement. It's good.
During my final work in my graduation and also in my MBA, I searched some project in Portugal called Ugly Fruit. Do you know, Eva? It's the fruit that no one wants because it's ugly, but it's very tasteful, and we have just to recode our mindset to beautiful packaging, perfect things to buy. So there's a lot of projects in Brazil, here in Barcelona, in Portugal, around the world that are helping us to moving forward.
I also think that there's a lot that people in the global north can learn from the global south. For example, when I was growing up, if your TV breaks, you don't buy a new one because you can't afford to buy a new one. There's someone who can fix it. If you're wearing a clothing item and there's a rip in it, you sew it. There's a whole culture around repairing things. But in the global north, there isn't. If something breaks, like, you have to buy a new one. In fact, the things, I feel like they make them to break after a certain period of time, just so that you can buy a new one.
There's actually, I mentioned it already in the chat, but there's a really good documentary. I'm not sure if it's in English though, but I think it is. It's called Goodwill Dumping, and it's actually about it's two filmmakers that are showing the ugly side to the consumption addiction of the global north, and especially Northern Europe. And I mean, the US, of course, also has a big impact. But there's this idea that we buy all this new stuff all the time, and then we recycle it, and we give it to charity or goodwill, but then it gets dumped in a country supposedly to help these poor people, because that's the idea, is like, oh, we're giving it to people who need it more. But basically what we're doing is we're just throwing, we're just basically dumping our trash with a community that is also definitely not needing our trash at all. And it's, in a way, it's like colonialism, but then extended into this new capitalist form, where like also drenched with white saviorism, where we're supposedly helping, but actually we're making our problem someone else's problem. And maybe I'm sounding a little bit too negative today, but I think already with my mood in the beginning, I showed you that my mood is that I'm a little bit, not a little bit, but pretty fed up. I'm still hopeful, but I'm fed up with the arrogance and the ignorance of also the country that I live in, because the country that I live in is I think we've had a lot of a big impact from a colonial history, but we're still not taking responsibility. And I think in Europe, we're one of the worst performing countries. A lot of innovation actually comes from the Netherlands, but if you see how we're performing compared to, for instance, Germany, we're scoring really bad. And I think we really have to ask for liability from our government and for the companies, because something has to change right now. And I think all the knowledge is here, and there's a lot of solutions here, but now we also we have to really demand liability as well. I think that's really important.
Yeah, all of this is bringing me to the concept of a circular economy, which I think is where we're headed and where we need to go. I keep thinking back to communities prior to modern day society, where everyone was a steward of their own environment and everything was a closed loop system, and everyone took care of their space because their space was just an extension of themselves and their family and their community. And it's so interesting that now that we've opened up to globalization and really gross incentive structures like profit and power and global dominance, that we're now participating in all of this behavior that is just so wasteful and so destructive, and to us, the passive kind of participants of the society that are just born into it and are like waking up like, hey, what the is going on? I think the solution to closing that loop again and bringing it back isn't necessarily to say no trade, no globalization, nothing, but perhaps it's that transparency that's going to close the loop, because we're actually going to be able to see where everything goes, and we're going to be accountable for where things go once our, trash gets thrown into a truck and it drives away. That's not the end of our knowledge of where those things go. We actually know exactly where they go, and then the right pressure will come about, and we'll be able to take care of the world as if we're taking care of our own neck of the woods where we used to live, and where that was just the extension of our world.
I'll let you go first, Lara.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Villa just put on our chat about the knowledge in the indigenous communities. In this COP, from Brazil, we had the biggest um, delegation with Black people and indigenous people. We had Chai, an indigenous leader, opening the opening ceremony of the COP26. So, but it was not easy to the South Globe to be this important conference, international conference about climate, because we had to know how to speak English with this British, Scottish accent. The currency, because the economy after the pandemic it's worse. How the jet lag, it's very confused. So yes, to address the vulnerabilities, the poorest, the woman, the indigenous people, uh, it was very complicated, but we were there, putting our importance in the center of the discussion. So I would like to highlight my co-delegate's role in this COP26, because it's a very white and homogeneous place. So yes, we are in the green blue zone, sorry, but a lot of people um, were in the out of the COP space. So, and we had the people summit around the space, but we are also focused on the negotiation that someone, I think it's Shayla, said that we expected more. Also, the UN secretary said after the COP that we will not give up, but and we need to be strong. So it's not the end. COP, it's the beginning, and I think the key question is to educate the next generation and this generation too, because um, we will understand our world in this journey to the race to zero and to survive.
Yeah, the talk about indigenous communities is really taking me back to some of my own culture. So I'm Igbo, and Igbo people are found in southeast Nigeria, some parts of Cameroon as well. And we see the ground as a god. So we don't only have one God, but different gods, and the ground is a god. And when you do something against the ground, you've actually committed an offense that you can never undo. And some of those offenses are even things like cutting down trees. Some fruits, you cannot take it from the tree. You have to wait for it to fall down, and then you can take it. Some animals, you cannot kill them, you cannot hunt them. And I think a lot of these practices were ways of preserving the environment. But of course, because of colonialism, a lot of this knowledge is wiped off or demonized. Um, when I want to find out a bit more about the culture, it's very hard because this culture is, it's no longer widespread today. And I think these are some of the things that it would be really wonderful to bring back.
Can I grab it, Vida? Thanks. Yeah. So I wanted to say something about this Black Friday thing, because it still resonates as this extremely absurd thing that we have, that now where I live in this little village in Alentejo, which is one of the least populated areas in Europe, it feels even more absurd, because what I'm experiencing here is that I, for the first time in my life, because I used to live in big cities, I can understand much better the where the things come from, like who produced this tomato, and so it's a local market, and you know the sellers, you know their gardens, and so there is already the transparency that I was longing for so much, and so I stopped going to the supermarkets, and I can buy as much as possible without plastic. So I realized what I'm doing right now is creating this space that I felt is not possible in the city, in a globalized world, to try to control this little community, this little environment, and from there gain the understanding to also reach out again. And so seeing from this perspective, like a thing like Black Friday is so utterly useless. Yeah, like the fact that how this way of thinking about everything, your trays that you leave, where goes my shit? Yeah, I'm still not having a composting toilet, but many of my people here do. So really, it's really learning about the processes that and our impact that we have on this planet. Yeah, is such an empowering thing that yeah, I'm hearing these things like Black Friday, and it's so out of this world. So yeah, and what you just mentioned, Ifetu, about the soil and the importance of the soil, that's also something that comes up here quite a lot, because there has been so much knowledge being lost in the last generations. The soil is like getting poorer and poorer by the way it is treated. So yeah, the possibility that I feel that we have in this little experiment in this little place is to really infuse the knowledge from indigenous cultures, from the world, from the studies that have been done, and implemented right here. And I think we can all do that. We can all do that with our direct neighbors. And yeah, I just want to pass on this experience of empowerment by trying to look right and left before I focus outside, which made me feel utterly yeah, overwhelmed and sort of weak.
Yeah, I think it is really crazy how we got addicted to these kinds of things, right? It makes us I think humankind, or at least maybe the global north, has the idea that we are above nature, that we don't need nature, and that we're fine without it, not realizing that we're part of nature, and if we keep fucking up the ecosystem, it will just get rid of us at some point, right? Because if we're too much of a problem, nature will deal with us. I've often said 10 years ago, when I was in some public speaking arenas, and people were like, oh, it's all about the tree hugging, and I said, you know what? Actually, it is about preserving our own kind. And if we keep behaving like such assholes, that will become our own end. Because at a certain point, I'm never worried about Mother Nature not being able to overcome us. I'm not worried about what happens with nature when we're no longer here. Nature will reinvent itself. It will deal with everything, that we've challenged her with. But we won't survive. And I find it so painful to see that we don't understand that we're not it's not nature that we're ruining, it's our living environment that we're ruining, it's the quality of life that we're ruining. And no matter how much money you have, at a certain point, if there's no more oxygen in the air, if there's no more soil to build food on, if there's no more, then what is there? There's nothing. And maybe, yeah, you can have all the money in the world and maybe move to Mars, as of course some of the biggest dickheads are trying now. But I mean, like, I don't understand that that's not something that people understand, that there's no way to get around nature. And if we are the soar in the ecosystem, then we will be wiped out.
I recently heard someone say, let the assholes move to Mars. Let them leave us alone. Let them go away so we can just be here without them. Yeah, it's a full circle, right? Like, we somehow digressed away from being connected with nature. When I say we, I mean like the stupid global north, disconnect that we were unfortunately born into and taught as a culture. And we're trying to circle it back, go back to what the indigenous have always known, and that is that you're part and parcel of your environment, and you got to take care of it, to take care of yourself. It's again re-emphasizing this unfortunately lost and suppressed, not entirely, but very much so, knowledge of indigenous peoples. And I really hope that we can either go back to their creation stories and their tales and their world perception, or invent some sort of hybrid of the old and new, where we can sort of create a new language and a new wisdom that works for us in the modern era, that can marry the past with all of the new fun science, innovation, technology. I really am waiting for this, and maybe it's already happening, but this like post wisdom or post ignorance world, where we're again putting wisdom in the middle, and with some hybrid of the old and the new, where we're not such assholes, and we're not being run and taught by assholes.
Anyone would like to add the final words before the checkout? Okay.
It's women, and of course also men, but mainly women like yourselves, that make me have hope for the future. So thank you for doing everything you're doing.
Thank you. And Shayla remembers me. If is there a B planet? I don't think so. So thank you very much. It was very comfortable and great to share this thought with you. And before we close, I would like to question you how you don't choose the extinction.
That is such a hard question. I feel like almost every single thing I do, as long as we exist in this system, we're just choosing it every single minute. But one thing I'm trying to do is to work less, and it's like to kind of remove this focus on productivity a little bit. And I don't know how that translates, but it's just like my own way of just kind of just trying to say a little bit of no to the system. Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea how to answer that question, but I love Ifatu's work less, and I'll add work less, feel more. It's maybe a good way to, yeah.
Yeah, so as I mentioned already before, I try to avoid plastic. That's one thing. And I'm manifesting this compost toilet next year.
For once, I'm lost for words. I mean, but no. I mean, I think all we can do is try to make the impact that we can, and try to inspire others. I think one of the biggest things that I feel is one of my personal responsibilities is to try and make the movement more inviting and more inclusive, not so white people focused, and try to make it more democratic. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do from my perspective, for what I can, of course. But I mean, there's yeah, I think that's what I can do. Try to inspire people to join the movement.
So to close, I would love to add my way to avoid the extinction. So spreading the word about Agenda 2030, inspiring the youth of my country and around the world, and also reducing the quantity of meat in my diet. So it's what I am trying to do.
É difícil, não é? Para uma brasileira.
Sim, pelo menos, at least we have the Monday without meat. Segunda sem carne, aí para os brasileiros.
Also, as an African, very hard. Well,
Yes. Okay. So now I think we finish our dialogue. Once again, thank you very much. We lost Rob in the journey, but it's recording, and thank you very much. You that you see us after on YouTube, and also again add us on the social media, and but to us continue this conversation and take action, because it's urgent. We need to act. If not, there is no planet B. There's no future for us without action and climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was lovely to
Thank
be
you so
here in the
much.
background and listen to your dialogue. Unfortunately, like you said, we missed Rob on the way, but I think his contribution is alive and it continues. And yeah, I'm gonna post here in the chat. There is a link you can tap into and just share with us how this experience was for you. Yeah, how do you experience the format? What do you take out of it? We would love to hear, so we can continue making more of these events. And we're also gonna send an email today connecting all of you. So you'll have the contacts of each other to be in touch and to potentially, create further conversations from there. Thank you so much, Lara, for a beautiful facilitation. Sheila, Willa, Eva, and Ifatu for your participation, and Rob as well, if you're listening to us. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Muito obrigada. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
thanks, everyone.
Obrigada. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.